Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast Thought and Perspective, and I'm here with family doctor Scott Jensen, former senator in Minnesota, and I want to get his thought and perspective on the medical profession. And I've seen in my local area, it's definitely caused a divide between patients and physicians. And what about colleagues? What about your colleagues?
That's a great question, Matt. I think that's going to be a dark chapter that goes forward from this COVID pandemic. It's going to be, unfortunately, one of the legacy memories. I have never seen the medical profession bicker and fight like we do. In the past, I was expected to have conversations with my patients, empower my patients to be involved in that decision making, and we would choose what we're going to do. Today, I'm getting colleagues sharply criticizing me, some calling for me to be investigated by the Board of Medical Practice because I'm doing something that they're not doing. I might be encouraging more strongly vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc supplementation. I might be willing to treat with budesonide or dexamethasone more liberally than they might, or I might be willing to use hydroxychloroquine and they've chosen not to. In the past, we chose what we chose. We worked with our patients. A good example would be in 1976 with Legionnaires disease. In Philadelphia, a lot of people at this Legion convention got sick as the convention was coming to a close. And we were befuddled in medicine. We didn't know what was happening. People were coming down with pneumonia and they were being treated with the typical anti-pneumonia antibiotics and they were not doing well. We sort of stumbled across a drug called erythromycin, which is not really considered a big hitter or a heavy hitter, but it was curing people. It's interesting because erythromycin also is really good for walking pneumonia. But back to 1976, if I had a patient with Legionnaires disease, I would treat with erythromycin. It hadn't been officially approved by the FDA. There wasn't enough time. We were just trying to save lives. Doctors weren't getting on doctors' cases and saying you shouldn't do that. We were all in it together because the objective was to help patients. Well, it took probably 6 to 12 months for the actual organism to be identified that was causing the Legionnaires disease, and it was a bacteria that is now called, I think it's called Legionella is the name of the bacteria because of where it started.
Sure.
We'll fast forward now to, if you will, COVID-19. There's data out there that says that if early in the disease you have COVID-19 and you know that you have it and a patient isn't doing well, hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin may be very helpful. If a physician has a conversation with a patient and they choose to do this, why would that bother a physician on the other side of St. Paul or a physician who's maybe a specialist who never treats people in the trenches in primary care? So that's been a huge issue with, I think, this pandemic is relationships have been fractured and physicians are literally bickering with one another. That's unfortunate. And then the other piece is the relationships. I'm having new patients come to me because their physician has basically rejected them outright. A patient might go to their physician and say, if I get sick, could we talk about hydroxychloroquine? And the physicians are getting so angry that they're basically, if you will, dissing the patient. Sometimes they've actually said, I've had patients tell me that they've actually been dismissed from the practice. Other times, the physician is just rude and the patient chooses to find another physician. This is really unfortunate. Healthcare has always been centered around the patient, not around the physician. Mm-hmm. I think the last 75 years, physicians have gotten a little arrogant. I think once we started transplanting hearts and doing all the stuff we do, we're pretty impressed with ourselves. It has to center around the patient. If you go back to 100 years ago, 200 years ago, or even the best healthcare we do today, it's when the patient gets a chance to tell their story, share with me what they're thinking. A lot of times, the patient literally tells me the diagnosis. So I think that relationship between patient and physician has also been fractured, as well as the relationship between physician and physician.
Isn't that what science is about, too? I mean, you guys bouncing ideas off of each other, guys and gals, obviously. I say guys, not. But that's how you develop these different cures and how to help patients, right? Is bouncing ideas. Oh, why don't you try this, try that, instead of it's my way or no way.
You are exactly right, Matt. If you actually look at the definition of science, it's really 3 pieces. It's observe, measure, and then based on that, you create a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And you want to make sure your hypothesis is right or wrong. So you try to create an experiment to prove that or not. If you find that your hypothesis is correct, the best thing you can do is get other scientists or physicians to do something similar to see if they can confirm what you learned. And if your hypothesis is wrong, then back to the drawing board, come up with another hypothesis and create an experiment. That's what we should be doing. And we can do that. I've been doing that in my clinic. I've been watching my recovered COVID-19 patients. And periodically, we've been checking their antibodies to see, are they continuing to hold on to that visible marker of IgG antibodies? We know that in 2002, many patients were able to hold on to antibodies from that coronavirus 1, SARS, for 5-6 years. Well, we're asking ourselves the same questions now. And I think that would be another conversation maybe, is what happens with holding on to antibody protection if we come across a variant?
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about that down the road.
Let's do that. Hey, Dr. Jensen, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Matt.
You bet.